State personnel files, what's in them and who gets to see them? These are common questions among Unit 7 employees. Hi, I'm Terry Cox, Communications Director for CSLEA, and with me is Andrea Perez, one of our 6 attorneys here. A lot of questions about personnel files, and I understand there's not just one.
Right, and actually Article 14.7 of the Unit 7 contract talks about files. And it's an important contract section to be aware of because it applies to everybody in the bargaining unit. And basically what it says is there's 2 types of files. There's an official personnel file, or an OPF, is what we call it, and that's normally housed at the headquarters of whatever department you work for. And then there's a supervisory file, or a drop file, which is kept at your work location and is monitored by your immediate supervisor. The other thing that 14.7 also says is that OPF, that official personnel file, and that supervisory file or drop file are really the only 2 files the state should be maintaining on any employee. Basically, the contract says the employee has the right to know what files are being kept on them and where. And so it should really only be those 2 files.
So what goes into those files? What doesn't belong in those files? And how long does the information stay on record?
Well, we'll take the OPF. An OPF, your official personnel file, has everything from your original employment application, beneficiary information, retirement information. That holds your quarterly evals, your probationary reports. It can hold the record of your training, certificates you've received, as well as commendables. But it also has some negative material if you have negative material. A supervisory file can have the same things as your OPF, but it may be a bit different. There can be certain types of negative documents in a supervisory file that aren't in your OPF. It can also have your quarterly reviews, evals of that nature, notes that your employer has taken about you for interviews, that kind of thing.
And how long does that information stay in that particular file?
Well, if we're talking negative information, there's kind of 2 schools of thought. Our contract says that negative information is kept in your official personnel file for 3 years unless otherwise dictated by law. There is really, as far as we are concerned, no other law applicable to employees regarding negative information. So what we believe at CSLEA is 3 years, unless the information says something different. Sometimes a corrective memorandum, a letter of instruction will actually say it's only going to be in your file for 1 year.
And let's talk about the supervisory file.
Well, you can get negative information like a letter of direction, a memorandum of direction into your supervisory file that does not go into your OPF, but that document is usually going to say that. It's going to say this is not going into your official file, it's going to stay here. If it doesn't say that, then that document's probably going into your OPF. But most negative things in a supervisory file are only going to be there for 1 year.
How do you access your file? Because it's probably a good idea for you to see what's in them.
Absolutely. 14.7 lets employees look at their files, at both files, your OPF and your drop file or supervisor file. So since the OPF is usually held up in Sacramento at headquarters or wherever your department's headquarters is, sometimes you can't get up here to look at it. So any employee can give us, CSLEA attorneys, their chosen representative, access to their file. They make a phone call to personnel, they say, I want to go look at my file, or I want my attorney to look at my file. You usually have to sign a written authorization for us to go look at it, and we'll go look at it. I recommend that people look at their files once a year, your OPF as well as your drop supervisor file. Of course, that file is easier to access because it's usually where you work. Same thing, put in a request to your supervisor that you want to look at the file, and they have to give you access to that file. And once you look through it, you can request that aged things that are older than 1 year or older than 3 years, come out of that file.
You talked earlier to me about what to sign and what not to sign. A lot of times you're asked to sign something, but you don't agree with it. Talk to me a little bit about that.
The contract says specifically that anything that goes in that file has to be reviewed and signed by the employee. So that is your right to make sure that you look at everything before it goes into either one of your files. So if you get, let's say, a corrective memorandum that's requiring your signature, we always encourage you to sign. Signing only acknowledges receipt. It does not say you agree with what the document says. And usually it will say right by the signature line, signing to acknowledge receipt. If that document doesn't say that, feel free to write it in underneath. But always sign the things that go in your OPF or your supervisory file.
And if you don't agree with it, what do you do?
If you don't agree with what has been handed to you, sign it. Make sure there's notation there that you don't agree. And then use what you have at your disposal in our contract was that you have a right to a rebuttal. You have 30 days from receiving this negative document to write your side of the story. That rebuttal is attached to that document during the life of the document, and it's in your file with the actual document.
And what is your role? When do I call you? When do I need you when it comes to my personnel files?
I really feel like I should get a call if you get any kind of negative documentation, whether it's an adverse action or just a corrective memo. Because especially if it's a memo, I want to read it, I want to know what's going on, and I want to walk you through the rebuttal process. It's really important that that rebuttal kind of be worded the right way, that it's professional, that it addresses what's wrong and it doesn't come off as an attack of your supervisor, for example. We want that to be worded professionally, and sometimes, well, most of the time the attorneys can help walk you through that process. Your files are confidential. Only you can look at them, your designated representative, if you've given that person permission, as well as your supervisor. So it's important that you realize that people can't be in and out of the file. And if you feel that somebody's doing that, that's a contract violation, that's something we can grieve. The other thing that should not be in your OPF is if you've had an investigation against you as an employee that's resulted in not sustained or is exonerated or unfounded. That material should not be in your OPF or your job file. Now, the department can keep it elsewhere for their own reference and records, but it should not be anywhere near your file if there was an unfounded investigation against you. So one other thing that goes along with looking at your file and being aware of what's in there, and just counseling in general, is that your supervisor, they are entitled to counsel you. If there's something you're doing wrong work-wise and they think you need a performance appraisal, they're entitled to do that verbally, but they aren't entitled to talk to you in front of anybody else. So if you're going to be counseled regarding work performance, something you're doing wrong, some problems that your supervisor is having with you, they have to do that interview with you outside of the hearing of others. It's supposed to be private. So if you get chastised, talked to, yelled at, or anything in front of coworkers, that is actually a violation of our contract, and you can file a grievance on that.
And what do you do in that circumstance when you're right there and now, and you can't just pick up the phone and call you?
Ask that supervisor, hey, can you talk to me in private? Can we go over here and have this discussion? If they won't do that, you got to go ahead and do it. You don't want to be insubordinate. You got to sit there and listen. But then give us a call as soon as you can. Tell us what happened, and we'll deal with it.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. As always, if you have any questions, any suggestions, any ideas, we're here for you. Give us a call or send us an email. We appreciate hearing from you. Thank you.